Right, so finally done with God of War Ragnarok about a month after everyone else was, and I wanted to savour this. I wanted to savour it. Not only that, but because I was doing it on stream and everything, it took a little bit longer than it would have done if I wasn't streaming it every day. But the I wanted to give like my full on thoughts about this because um, I really liked it. It's my new favourite game of all time. So yeah, a lot. I think if you weren't there for the streams, that's fine. That's fine. Um, but yeah, this was the. I think not only has it been some of the best moments of my streaming career have been because of what's happened over the last month with experiencing this game and experiencing it on stream. Streaming any game makes the experience a whole lot more fun because you have that community interaction as well, and just it does like kind of bolster. But I think even if I wasn't streaming it, I would still have had so much fun, and I would have had like so many emotional responses to a lot of the stuff that happens in this, because you spend 30 hours with Kratos and Atreus in the 2018 one, and then I think playing that one and then playing this back to back, that kind of helped as well to get that refresher and to kind of, because the games do follow directly from each other. I mean, the first like hour of this takes place before the end of 2018, so it's not directly into it, but about an hour in, it is that scene at the end when Thor shows up. And Thor in this game is brilliant. I think this is a much better depiction of Thor than in Thor: Love and Thunder. I prefer this depiction of Thor than because this is a Norse mythology Thor, not Marvel superhero Thor. He feels more grounded, and he feels weirdly to say, despite the themes of the game being surrounded by mythology and giant like gods and this kind of sprawling epic and like the end of all things looming over the player at all times, the characters feel very real and relatable, and it does. Like Thor is an alcoholic. Is an alcoholic that is being abused by his father, at least emotionally abused and manipulated by his father, made to feel like he's less than everyone else that's gone before him, and is kind of just a bit of a slob. The Thor in this is kind of the most tragic character, because even at the end of the game, I will go into spoilers. I will go into a lot of spoilers. Even at the end of the game, he eventually like stands up to Odin. He eventually stands up to Odin, and then unfortunately gets stabbed and dies. But yeah, he's a really like complex character. I think that goes into how much time you actually spend with him, and the building up Odin, building up Thor. I think that's what this game does leagues better than the first one, because the biggest thing with the first one is that Boulder didn't really feel like all of the character development of Boulder came right at the end, right at the climax, and he didn't really feel like a threat, or he didn't feel human. He didn't feel relatable. You didn't kind of see his point of view. You didn't spend enough time with him to develop that character so that you cared when you finally fight him at the end of the game. With this, you care about Thor and you care about his story, and you followed that narrative, and he's been in so much of the game. The same with Odin. So much of the game has been spent building up and learning, and you've been on their side playing as Atreus. You're kind of infiltrating the Asgardians, and I think all of the Atreus stuff is a lot more interesting than the stuff that Kratos is doing. Kratos is very much like just going around fixing other people's problems and finding, oh, here's a character that needs help, here's another character that needs help. I must go against my fate. I don't believe in prophecy, and all this stuff. And as much as I enjoyed all the Kratos stuff, and it does culminate into a really big spectacle at the end, the kind of how this game comes to a head, and the actual spectacle of Ragnarok is amazing. Seeing Thor fight Jormungandr, seeing Surtur rise up as a giant flame monster, that's really cool, and that spectacle is really cool. But the smaller moments, the moments between Freya and her brother, Freya and Kratos, even Freya and Atreus, I think those moments spoke to me more on a emotional level than holy shit, big monster fight. The big monster fights are good, and the bosses in this game, there's no repeats, which is so refreshing. There's nothing like the trolls, the big trolls with the big stone pillars in the first game, or in the 2018 game. Those got old really quick, and there's a bit in this where you see one, but it's killed during cutscene, and that's so that it gave me a chuckle, and it did make me laugh. The dwarves, Brock and Sindri, get their own character development, and Sindri is at a completely different point at the end of the game where he is at the start, and his kind of arc is so interesting because you get it. You understand why he kind of becomes this kind of depressed asshole. He is an asshole at the end of the game. He kind of goes into this characterization of what Atreus was after he found out that he was a god. That's kind of how Sindri ends the game. He's very he hates Atreus. Tyr is okay. So that's a big spoiler, so I'm gonna leave that for the back end, because the culmination of everything to do with Tyr in this game is the single biggest moment of the game for me, bigger than the actual showcase of Ragnarok right at the end, bigger than the Odin boss fight. The Odin boss fight was great, by the way, having Freya and Atreus team up, and having moments where you actually play as Atreus, like, half of the game is spent following Atreus and what he's doing, and I can easily say he's probably the main character, and Kratos is playing a support act here, because what Atreus is doing, all of his stuff, is what forwards the plot, what introduces the new characters, and he's spending time with Thor, spending time with Odin, infiltrating Asgard, and actually, like, making friends with Thrud. And there's another character that's like the last remaining giant, Angrboda, and there's kind of this love triangle there, where I don't know if it's specifically stated in the game, but it's definitely like heavily referenced that Atreus likes both Thor's daughter and Angrboda. It's heavily implied that he's like where do I go? But that is the most, that kind of stuff is interesting because you're getting new characters and they're good characters, they're well written. But yeah, I really enjoyed everything about the game. The only thing that I will say is a negative is how handholdy it is. I understand why, because God of War 2018 was a normie game. And what I mean by that is that it was a game that got people who aren't gamers into video games. It's a massive story-driven epic, and this is the same on a much bigger scale, because it does feel like this is the end game. It feels like an actual RPG in the fact that there are party members that switch out, and the closest thing I can compare it to with how the party members work is Final Fantasy 3. I know that's a bit of an old one and a bit of a out there comparison, but in that game you have party members that stay with you for about a couple hours, and then they go off and they get replaced by someone else, and then they go off and they get replaced with someone else. I think that's either 3 or 2. There's either Final Fantasy 3 or Final Fantasy 2. And possibly 15 as well. I think 15 has the same thing, where you have a party member that stays with you, and then they go, and they're with you for a bit, and then they go. That's kind of how it works here. The only two are Atreus and Freya. If you had moments of the game where you were actually playing as Freya as well, then, oh my god, the game would be up here. But yeah, there's so much to like. But the game is handholdy. And what I mean by that is that every 5 minutes it's just brother. You know what I mean. If you've played the game, you know what I mean. You're stuck in a puzzle. You spent like a minute, not even a minute, trying to figure out, like 30 seconds trying to figure out what a puzzle is, and you got like, brother, try this. Brother, try that. And it's just like, man, fucking shut up. And everyone does it. Atreus, like, you get hit with a status effect. Brother, you're covered in Bifrost. You get hit. Brother, you're on fire. It will pass. Oh my god. The amount of times I heard, brother, you're on fire. It will pass. If I had £1 for every time that I heard that, I would be able to buy a lot of McDonald's. But you know what I mean. That's the only thing that kind of got me, and the fact that it doesn't stop throughout the game. The fact that it's still like 20 hours in, you're still getting like, I apologize about the glare, by the way. There's not much I can really do about that apart from shutting my curtains, and then the glare from my ring light will be even worse. So apologies about that, but the rest of the lighting is okay, so we'll kind of make do with that. The fact that the tips kind of continue throughout the game, and they're still as prevalent 20 hours in. They're still as prevalent during, like, the boss fight against Odin right at the end of the game. The fact that that happens, and there's way to turn them off either, and that's kind of what's annoying. And that's the only thing, and it's minor. It's so minor, because it does kind of fit with the characterization of Mimir, that he would be overprotective. So that's kind of my defense for it, is that Mimir is kind of overprotective, and he does kind of point out obvious things anyways. And the stuff they do with Mimir's character in this is interesting, outside of the brother. You're going to be hearing that a lot anyway throughout the game, so a few more times in combat isn't going to hurt anyone. Everything else is absolutely perfect, though. Everything else is so perfect. It does take a while to actually get different combat moves and to get your new weapon, the spear. When you do get it, it's so fun. It's such a good thing to use, and it feels really good. And it feels different from the rest of the other two weapons. I think that's a really cool thing that the two God of War games that these two more recent God of War games have done, is they've made all of the weapons feel really unique and feel different. And the spear is exactly that. It feels so much different, and the fact that it's like an unlimited supply of spears is so much fun. It's really cool. That Heimdall fight that you make the spears to use, that fight is my favourite in the game. It's not the hardest, but it is the most kind of like strategic in a way. The Odin fight is so good, and all of the boss fights are good, and the best moments of the game are during the boss fights. There's nothing that's reached the levels of Kronos in God of War 3 yet, but I don't think this game was trying to do that, and the kind of smaller one-on-one fights were my favourites. So yeah, I think they did really well. I think they did really well with the boss fights in this, and the fact there's no repeats. There are a couple of the Stone Guardians, but they don't outstay their welcome, and there's not more than 3. There's like 3. And because you fight them as Atreus, it feels different because you're fighting them as a different character. So yeah, the new characters that are introduced are fun. I've got to talk about the moment. I've got to talk about Tyr. I've got to talk about the Tyr reveal, and the Tyr reveal is that Tyr never existed. He's probably dead. We don't have confirmation of whether he's actually dead or alive. But Tyr was Odin all along. It was Odin all along. And that moment when when Tyr is revealed as Odin and then he stabs Brock and Brock dies. That was the moment that kind of got me the most, more than the ending. There was a moment at the ending where I was like, oh no, Atreus, and then they killed Freya, and it was not Freya, Freyr, who's Freya's brother, who, like, I thought, holy shit, something's gonna happen to Freyr, because, you know, he's such a compelling, cool character, and they don't put a compelling, cool, nice character in these kind of games without killing them off. So I felt like he was too good to be true, or too good. He was too nice of a character to make it out of the game unscathed, and he didn't make it out of the game unscathed. So yeah, it was a big thing. It was that moment when Brock died kind of got me. It got me in the feels. It got me in the feels so bad. But yeah, I've kind of exhausted everything that I can say about the game. There are minimal faults, and the faults that I did say are things that I understand why they implemented in the game. I don't quite understand why they're in the game until the end. I don't understand why the constant barrage of tips and advice are still in there 20 hours in, and I don't quite understand why there's not an option to turn them off. I get having them in there, but have an option to turn them off, or like have it so that you press like up to get a hint from the mirror, like how in Darksiders you can press up to get a hint from Mark Hamill. But yeah, everything else in the game is perfect, and I can't fault it for being a bit too handholdy, when all of the optional stuff is where you'll get your challenge from, the boss fights are where you get your challenge from, even with how like handholdy Mimir is. In a boss fight, you just, if you get distracted in a boss fight for too long, then you're gone. The only thing for me that I kind of have to get to grips with these God of War games is that it is the same, like, it's the same control scheme as like a Soulsborne game. So it is like the R1, R2 to attack, and I'm so used to square being attack because I'm a PS2 boy, and every other game that I play is square to attack, or square mixed with triangle, or square mixed with circle to attack, and having it be R1, R2, it takes time. The game is far long enough to get that implanted into your head, and then the problem is you go to play anything else, you'll be pressing R1 and R2 to attack, and you'll be like, why the fuck am I blocking? But yeah, that kind of takes a while to get your brain out of playing every other game and getting your brain into, right, we're playing God of War, this is how we play God of War. But yeah, the actual combat loop feels really fun and feels really good. But like I said, it does take a while, and by a while I mean in the 10 to 15 hour range to get moves that are different to the ones in the first game, and even to get like a heavy runic attack, it takes like, at that point you're on the road to get the Dropnir Spear by the time that you get a runic heavy attack. So yeah, that kind of that's the only other thing, playing so much of the game with such a limited moveset, and a moveset that you've already seen in a previous game, that did kind of bum me out. But there's so many other games that do that, and past that point the combat goes through the roof, and you know, it's not like there's not subtle nuances, like you have shield breaks and you have like armor breaks and you have like elemental attacks now, and there's so much more stuff implemented to make combat smoother and to make everything run smoother and to make combat not as much of a drag as in the first one, and make it so that you don't get overwhelmed as easily as you did in the first one. So there is new stuff, and it does feel very much like combat is very like methodical. There's a lot of like signs for like red to dodge, blue to shield break, yellow to guard, and it's a lot of like timing based stuff, and that stuff I'm not very good at, but I did get kind of good with it by the end point. And during some of the fights against the kings, I may have been the best there ever was with it. But yeah, it was very fun to kind of learn this like timing based system, and it kind of fell into like rhythm game at some points, especially with some of the fights against the optional kings. Those kind of fall into like learning patterns and almost like a rhythm game kind of thing. But anyways, that is my thoughts on God of War Ragnarok. It's my favourite game of all time now. I don't have to think about it. The game had me in tears 3 times. Every other game that I've played, maximum once. There are so many bits and pieces and cool things throughout the game, and it made me actually want to do optional stuff. And I think I'm gonna go in and try and fight Gnar in a couple days. Yeah, I'm really happy with God of War Ragnarok. I feel like it was worth the time and investment, and it was worth the wait as well. And it's so good. It's such a good game. It's a beautiful game. It looks stunning, even on PS4. On a PS5, I can't wait to experience this on a PS5. To experience like the Ragnarok moment on a PS5. To experience a Nidhogg fight on a PS5. Oh my god. Yeah, there's so much about this game that I could gush about it for hours, but I'm gonna end this video here before I make this even longer than it already is. Yeah, I will see you guys tomorrow, or in the next video, whenever that may be. I'll see you guys then. Peace. And this may be the last video before Christmas and the New Year, so Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. If you celebrate that stuff, you probably do celebrate New Year, because, you know, New Year, Happy New Year. You may celebrate at a different time, you may celebrate it on a different, completely different month to all of us over in the UK. But yeah, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Holidays, whatever it is. Happy belated Thanksgiving to all you Americans out there. I will see you guys in the next video. I'll see you guys next year. Peace.